There was once a land where the sun rose with a kind of slow, deliberate grace, casting a golden hue over a world shaped by its own convictions. In that place, nestled among rolling hills and shivering trees, there stood a solitary house made of stone and time. Within that house lived someone who believed in order above all else. The world, to them, was a place that needed to be tamed, not by force, but by structure. Each morning was planned. Each meal, measured. Each word, chosen. And most importantly, each thought was curated with the precision of a craftsman. This person, whose name does not matter, had built their life on the art of pretending. Not the innocent pretending of children at play, but the deeper, more corrosive kind, the kind where one convinces oneself that the truth, as it stands, is simply too unmanageable to bear. For them, truth had once been something sacred, but over the years it became an inconvenience, then a nuisance, and finally an adversary. Years ago, though they never counted time in anything but completed tasks, there had been an event. A fracture. Not a tragedy in the traditional sense, no blood or loss of life. But a fracture in their image of themselves. It was a moment of raw, unfiltered recognition that they had not done the right thing, though all their justifications screamed otherwise. They had turned their back when they should have intervened. They had kept quiet when they should have spoken. But rather than confront this discord, they buried it deep under layers of rationalizations, and so began a quiet war within the walls of the stone house. Each day, as they carried out their rituals, watering plants that never quite bloomed, arranging books already perfectly aligned, sipping tea steeped exactly 3 minutes, a small voice within whispered truths that contradicted the life they had constructed. You knew, it would say. You saw. You chose not to act. They tried to drown it out with music, with rules, with noise. But the voice was not external, it lived inside them. And there is no wall thick enough to muffle a truth that resides within. At night, sleep came like an unwanted visitor. Dreams twisted into subtle accusations. They would see themselves standing at a crossroads, choosing the path of comfort rather than courage. Always the same dream, with different settings, different masks, but the same core. In an effort to silence these dreams, they tried to tell themselves stories. I did what anyone would have done. It wasn't my place. I didn't have all the facts. Each lie was like a brick in a wall they were building, not around themselves, but within. A partition between who they were and who they had convinced themselves they were, but peace did not come. Instead, it receded like the tide, slowly exposing the jagged rocks beneath. They stopped finding joy in the meticulous rituals that once brought them solace. The plants withered. The books gathered dust. The tea tasted bitter. The house, though silent, seemed to echo with the hollowness of their days. One day, without meaning to, they stumbled upon a forgotten mirror. It was hidden in the attic, wrapped in old sheets, its surface clouded by years of neglect. Drawn by something they couldn't name, they uncovered it, revealing a frame intricately carved with symbols they couldn't interpret. When they looked into the mirror, they saw nothing. No reflection. No face staring back. Just the dim, gray light of the attic. Confused, they wiped the surface again. Still nothing. Panic fluttered at the edges of their mind. It's a trick of the light, they said aloud, their voice a brittle echo in the stillness. But deep down, they knew. The mirror showed not what stood before it, but what resided within. And within them, there was a void shaped like the truth they had refused to face. For the first time in years, they sat down without a plan, without a list, without a purpose. They sat before the mirror, and waited, and slowly, the images began to form, not as reflections, but as memories. The moment of the fracture returned with clarity. They saw themselves turning away, heard the silence they allowed to grow, felt the exact weight of their inaction. It played out not as a dramatization, but as an indictment. And unlike the dreams, there was no waking escape. The person tried to look away, but the mirror held them in place, not with force, but with the inevitability of consequence. Then came the voice, not external, not imagined, but from deep within: you can't lie to yourself and live in peace. It was not said with anger or malice. It was simply a truth, ancient and patient, that had waited for acknowledgement. Tears came, not in a flood, but in a steady, exhausted stream. They cried not out of guilt alone, but from the relief of no longer pretending. The wall within cracked. The truths long buried pushed through the gaps, and with them came pain, but also clarity. In the days that followed, the world outside did not change. The sun still rose with its measured grace. The hills still rolled, the trees still shivered. But within the house of stone, there was movement. The mirror remained in the attic, but now it reflected something real, not perfect, not whole, but true. The person still kept their routines, but not to suppress their thoughts. Now, they made space for them. They spoke aloud the things they had feared to admit: I failed. I was afraid. I didn't know what to do. And with each confession, the peace they had chased like a phantom began to take root, not as a grand feeling, but as a quiet presence, like the calm that follows a storm. The voice inside did not go away. But it softened. It became less of a critic and more of a companion, reminding them not of what they had done wrong, but of how far they had come in facing it. They learned that peace is not the absence of truth, but its companion. That only by walking through the tangled forests of our own failings can we arrive at the clearings where forgiveness waits. Not from others, perhaps, but from ourselves. The house of stone still stood, now less a fortress and more a shelter. The mirror remained, no longer blank but filled with the evolving image of someone learning, day by day, to live without deception. They would never be free of the past. But they were no longer imprisoned by it. And that, they realized, was peace, not a gift. Not a destination, but a practice, a truth, finally welcomed home. True peace comes not from perfection or avoidance, but from the courageous act of facing one's own truths. This tale beautifully illustrates how denying uncomfortable realities, even for the sake of order or self-preservation, creates a quiet, persistent suffering. Only by confronting and accepting our past missteps, without excuses or illusions, can we begin to dismantle the walls we build within ourselves and create space for genuine healing. The deeper lesson is that authenticity and inner honesty are the foundations of peace. It's not about never failing, it's about being willing to sit with failure, to see it clearly, and to let it guide us toward a more honest way of being.